How's it brewing, everyone? Coffee Bean here with another video in the Kingdom Hearts Datazation boss battle breakdown. Try saying that 3 times fast. But in this video, we're going to be starting out with the boss Xemnas. Xemnas, for most people who know Kingdom Hearts, he's a final boss, the main antagonist in Kingdom Hearts 2. And for those of you who don't know, Xemnas is my favorite personally out of all of the Kingdom Hearts bosses, like the final boss fights and just bad guys in general. Like, yeah, Xehanort is like the leader of everything, and like Xemnas didn't really I guess necessarily coordinate a plan that was as big and as broad, but he was just so cool. Like, I don't know if it's just because of like the voice actor and him being so iconic. I'm gonna put like a pop-up on the screen for those of you who have played Soul Calibur. He's the announcer in that game. So for me, his voice has just become so iconic. But it's not only like the voice alone. The way that they wrote his character was so amazing. The fact that like he is like the nobody of Xehanort, but you'll notice he doesn't actually really use a keyblade. He uses like beam swords from his hand, which I thought were sick because it kind of counteracts the fighting against a keyblade without actually needing the keyblade itself. Beyond that, you'll see throughout the fight that he does have kind of a limited arsenal, but yet it's still very unique, and he uses everything in that arsenal to the fullest. So like I've already mentioned the beam swords, and he'll also shoot like laser blast at you. But then he also has, I don't even know what they call it, but it's almost like the same energy, like a nobody. And so they'll shoot at you like vines. And I don't even know how to explain like what it is, but most times it does just grab you and drags you into like where he wants you to be. It doesn't deal damage, but it does like throw you off because you're being positioned somewhere else. And so I thought that that was pretty cool that it's a move that kind of messes more with like you spamming the dodge button, because there are some bosses where you can just constantly keep dodging and dodging and dodging. But by introducing that move, it allows the boss to prevent you from continually just dodging through moves, which isn't that bad because from what I understand, all of his moves that deal damage don't actually, none of them are unblockable. But his ultimate here is what I think it's what like permanently got me hooked into Kingdom Hearts. Now, it's not the same as the one that they did originally in Kingdom Hearts 2, but I love the callback to this move and the update to it, the adaptation of the move into a new setting of like playstyle, because Sora does have different movements. He has different abilities. His defensive capabilities are not the same as 2. 2 was kind of busted with Reflect. That was the ultimate magic move. You could get out of so much with it. And so, with the lack of that move, there really was a difference in Sora's defensive options. And so, I just love like the fact that in Kingdom Hearts 2, they had it where you just like spam X and triangle, and you like reflected them, and you just like blocked all of the attacks. And so in this, it was really interesting to see that same move, but you actually get to play as you block things. And so I thought that was a nice little addition. But all in all, Xemnas really was not that hard of a boss. I did lose to him a couple times because, like I was saying about the sort of nobody energy vines, how they move you to different locations, there were definitely times where I would get moved somewhere and I would either try to block before being moved or too late after. And so I'd get moved and I'm like, oh wait, do I block again, but then I doesn't all register in my mind that I'd just been moved, and so then I get hit, and I'm like, okay, I'm going down. And so I really thought that that was a creative way to kind of get into the player's head and force them to just think a bit more. But all in all, I will say Xemnas was placed very well into this game. I feel like they were able to give him some of the moves that he originally had in Kingdom Hearts 2, while also being able to incorporate new moves that comboed off of those, and even just smaller things like his ultimate move still being a reference to Kingdom Hearts 2. They do that with a lot of bosses, but Xemnas, his has always been something special to me, and that's something I really appreciate. And on that note, let's get into the breakdown. Now, not all of Xemnas' moves deal damage. The little nobody vine things are basically there just as a setup for combos. So if you play pretty patiently, just wait for him to hit you with the vine and then block whatever attack comes next. Typically after maybe 4 or 5 of those sometimes, you should be able to counterattack, and you're pretty safe off of it too. Jumping from there, there's not really a whole lot to talk about that like I haven't already, because a lot of his stuff does string together so well. So I'm just pretty much going to use the rest of this breakdown to talk about his ultimate and how, I'm just going to be honest, I think it's one of the sickest moves in the game. Just seeing all the lasers around and just being like, all right, you're offensive, okay, no, go defense. Lasers start shooting at you. There is a new addition to it where you would see like those blue flashes in the back, and those are unblockable. As far as I know, those are the only unblockable damaging attacks that Xemnas has. But I felt like it really made you kind of pay attention to the flashing lights in the background, because as all the lasers are flying and you're blocking, and blocking causes the keyblade to flash, so it would be very easy to miss. But like, it was just something small. I feel like a good addition may have been giving him those unblockables in his regular attacks, but I completely understand why they would or would not have given it to him. And yeah, with that, Xemnas has been defeated. Moving on to Marluxia, I honestly have no clue how I want to piece this together, because he has a lot of different boss elements incorporated into his kit. He has, obviously, I believe all the bosses have at least one unblockable move. He's got AoE attacks, which is also pretty standard for most bosses. He's got a really wide range for some of his swings. Granted, he's swinging with like a huge scythe, so it makes sense. He's got those little flower minion things that will shoot at you, so it requires Sora to have some more AoE attacks himself. Personally, I would use Thunder on them in my first attempts, but after using it a couple times and then realizing that I need Fire later in the fight, I switched over to Fire, but then like I still wanted to be able to use Thunder, so I just opted to like not even worry about those plants. And in some of my runs, yeah, it did kind of bite me, but I got over it. But for the most part, like, the fight with Marluxia, it was a lot of not wait and baits, but just unga bunga is, I guess, how I would put it. Just being relentless and not giving any chance for him to really do a whole lot. There are times, obviously, where like you just have to back up. There will be no hit stun on him, so there's no point in jumping in and trying to attack. But there were plenty of times where I was like, okay, I've got the chance to go on the offensive. I'm going offensive. And there was like no legitimate reason to even like try to be that aggressive. But I think that's what made him such a fun fight. If you get your timing right, there are lots of openings to heal and recover, so you never felt like you were being cheated entirely when he actually beat you. It was, oh, okay, I had an opening here, I could have done this or that, but like I got lost in either trying to be super aggressive or you just like you froze for a second or two. Although I mentioned the whole like not being cheated thing, and then I remembered his ultimate. If you get hit, I think the start one is that one based on time? The first ultimate is based on time, so you have to deal like a certain amount. It's like a damage check, um, right? A DP check, damage point check. Um, so you have to break through his armor, and if you do before like your timer runs out, then you're able to dispel his move. Well, it happens to be a really annoying move. But like how I was saying, how I don't know how to describe him, I think that's probably the reason why. It's because he seems to have like these moves that look really intimidating, but don't do a whole lot. But then he'll do something that kind of seems like, oh, that won't be so bad. And then that's the move that like you dread the most. All of his moves that are really big and flashy typically aren't the ones that really like scare me, except for when he goes into his armored mode, because I feel like almost every time he went into it, I had no magic, and you can break through it one shot if you have magic. You hit him with fire, instantly breaks. But every time he got into it, I think typically he would follow it up after a very combo heavy move. So in most cases, I wouldn't have any HP left. So I would either have to heal with an item or I would have to heal using magic. And typically I just got scared and so I would heal with magic instead. I like to use cure to kind of damage boost through certain moves. Although I did think it was interesting that his final ultimate took a different approach to the whole aspect of, being able to take, in a sense, as long as you want in a fight, as long as you can stall out taking so much damage before you can heal again. Other fights will have like certain damage checks that are really hard to get past if you actually don't, reach the requirements. So I thought that this was an interesting way to kind of get you into that same situation without just like blatantly killing you through like a really heavy combo. Instead, it was, it gave you sort of like a time limit. But moving on to the actual breakdown of the fight, Marluxia was, like I said earlier, he was an interesting fight. There was a point where I remembered, also I was kind of told by the hints when you die, that you could break through his armor by hitting him with fire, but in some senses I had enough time to hit him with fire, but there's a lot of stalling in my brain. I can't remember if this is one where I was playing like in the dead of night at like 2, 3 in the morning or something. Because yes, I did that with a few of these fights where I would wake up in the dead of night and I'm like, I'm going to fight it and I'm going to beat them like right now. For the most part, a lot of them it was just like, I did them all like together. But there were a few, I think like 2 or 3 where I did them like super early in the morning. But Marluxia, he is one where like you do kind of have to be thinking about what he's doing. He's not one where you can just go in hacking and slashing and hope to win. But in the same sense, you also kind of can for a majority of the fight. Once you get, put into the whole countdown thing, that's when your brain really needs to kick in and really be able to analyze what all is going down. Because the first one, I believe, is an actual timer, so it'll just like continually count down until you hit 0. And once the countdown hits 0, you're dead. Like It doesn't matter how much HP you have. It doesn't matter if you, try to use that heal to kind of heal through the damage that you take. It's a I don't even know what they're called, but like, the game specifically built the move so that you can't get around it without passing that damage check. And then his final ultimate, it's actually, I find this to be super interesting because every hit that you can take is based on your level. So if you were level like 23, you could only take like 23 hits. Or not hits, but it's like counting down. I think it might be movements? It's either movement or just like a straight countdown. But it's based on your level, which is sick. I mean, it's annoying, but like it's super cool. And like, if I'm wrong on that, like maybe they changed it and I didn't know. Can someone like let me know? Because I'm fairly certain like that's been a thing since Marluxia has starred, I guess you would say, as a boss. But yeah, I got off topic, but with that, Marluxia's defeated. And to finish off the video, we'll be ending it with Luxord. Now, typically, I know with all the other characters, I've been doing I guess the more in-depth breakdown after I've finished going through the first initial fight. Like, I'll talk about the boss and whatnot, and some of the moves here and there. But in his case, the fight took forever. So to save you guys some time, and to make sure that my video doesn't run over 30 minutes long, I'm going to just talk about the fight and do the breakdown while the fight goes on. So Luxord is pretty unique. Actually, I think he's the only boss that you fight without a technical health bar. And that's because this is a time battle. Now, it might not look like it because there are no countdowns anywhere, and it doesn't really seem like, there's that much of a race against the clock. But on closer inspection, if you look at the two bars up at the top of the screen, you see Sora and Luxord's, and those are our time bars, our clocks, our countdowns. And every time either one of us does damage to the other, it lowers their timer. And I believe that there are certain moves that will, I think once we play a game, the winner of that game lowers the enemy's timer, and I believe they also gain a little bit of time themselves. So there's a gamble to each game, but Sora himself is not actually allowed to start them. Which might seem to be, like out of your favor, because now you're going, hey, if you can't start these games, then how do you, prompt to add more time to your countdown? Or how do you reduce his countdown faster? Well, there are a few things that you can do to help you with the mini games, not necessarily to stop them or to get around them. But you'll notice that all of Luxord's attacks, he throws cards, and they seem to be actually staying on the ground. But I'll get back to that in just a second. Right now, you'll see that he has cards spinning around him, and out of all of them, there's only one of them that's ever going to have a circle on it. And you'll notice that every time it came around, I only ever hit the one with a circle. So in that case, I won the minigame because I hit all the circle ones and I never got it wrong and hit one of the X's. So I gained time and Luxord lost time. And now, how I mentioned before, how all the cards were on the ground, all of those shuffle around in the middle and then they pop up, and there will be a certain number, depending on how many cards are on the ground, a certain number of the cards that pop up will be circles. The other ones are traps, and there's one of them that is Luxord. So if you block more of his attacks as they come at you, and you break those cards, there will actually be fewer on the ground. So when it comes to playing through that mini game, you can give yourself a little bit of a handicap, and it won't take as long to get through, and you can pretty easily beat that one. Like, I don't think I've ever failed that one and gotten the wrong card.
Live dangerously,
And I wanted to take the time explaining how that works, because essentially, whenever it comes to any of Luxord's mini games, you never want to hit a card with an X on it. X is essentially you fail. So in this game, we're not actually looking for circles this time, but we're looking for Luxord. So in a sense, it's kind of like a mixture of both of his mini games, but it's you have to react so fast, because you'll notice how the cards are flipping in and out, but they're also rolling around or shifting around in all angles, 360 degrees. Math stuff. But you'll notice that like sometimes they flip and it's only for an instant that you can see it, and you have to be so fast on it. I messed this one up, surprisingly enough. When I was going through the footage, I was trying to find an instant where I failed it, and I only found 2, which really surprised me, because I could have sworn when I actually played through the fight, I had way more mistakes. But it was less of this one and more of when he had the tiny circle and you had to hit the circle cards while they spun around him. That one was actually, surprisingly enough, one of his hardest mini games. But I mean, in this run, I seem to have gotten through like all of his mini games, not flawlessly, and okay, nowhere close to being flawless. But I'd say that this run of the boss was definitely way better than all of my other runs. But watching back all the other runs, I don't even see like where the big difference comes from, like where I made a lot of mistakes, which is, you know, a little confusing to me, but I mean, I'm not complaining. But yeah, his ultimate, it's definitely just like you have a lot of waiting. And so he wasn't necessarily one of my favorite bosses, because I'm not patient. And so I'm just like, yes, like let me get into the fight. And so whenever he started this ultimate move, I was just like, oh, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And I think that's why I took so many hits every time he got to this point, because I was just like, oh, you know, like I know I can just like power through. I know I can power through. But no, he just takes a lot of time. And that's not to say that he is a bad boss. Like, I think it really encompassed the mindset of playing a card game. You know, playing in a sense with the mental state and getting you to like get antsy. You start to get jumpy. They'll make him pop up and then disappear really fast, so that you'll look at the card and be like, ooh, that's him, and then you'll jump at it and miss. And so I'm like, okay, I might not have appreciated the fact that there were so many points where you had to pause, but I do think that it made for a... Okay, that was one fail. I tried to use lightning to hit the card, and I ended up hitting multiple cards. One thing I will say is a thought that I had that would have been really good for this fight is using only thunder. Thunder, it tracks onto the opponent, so it typically hits pretty accurately. I think that's the word I'm looking for. But it also allows you to mitigate how often you go to like swing or attack somewhere and you miss. Because I have Sora equipped at the moment for some moves that are a bit wider than others, and I know that can definitely get in the way at times. But you'll notice that not too long ago, I was in a pretty big lead time-wise, and now we are almost even. So to kind of wrap up the boss battle, I will say that being pressed for time is something that I'm actually pretty accustomed to. Yes, I am a bit of a procrastinator, so I do a lot of really good work in a really short span of time, and it kind of resonated a bit in this fight because as I'm fighting Luxord, I'm like, oh, my time is coming really close to being over, and in part, I felt like I was getting really aggressive, but I was also taking a lot of hits. So, I mean, you could take this as a lesson that, in procrastinating, you take a lot of hits, but a win is a win. So that wrapped up the Luxord fight. I do want to point out that I got Luxord and Marluxia recorded out of order, just in the video, not in the actual playthrough. So you're gonna see the Marluxia fight before Luxord, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Just wanted to tell you guys for continuity's sake. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will catch you next time.